So it's important to understand that the power of language. Sorry for that interference. There was an interference. As I draw this to a closer within the next 10 minutes, it's important to understand the power of the language by which the church is bound to operate. But also, it's important to point to and understand that Nebuchadnezzar's reign or kingdom, they understand the power of, the power of having a language, having oneness in language. Language. You see, there's something in the world of computing that they call programming language. The language in itself determines the effective operation of a thing. And a while back, we had a meeting with the youth while at church, and then I told them one of the things that, there was a conference that they held earlier. I said, one of the things that I was able to have observed that became as a reason of a failure to that other meeting was there was a communication gap. Communication is by language, but language is deeper than what only defines communications. And I will come there. I will come to the depth of this conversation because, again, one of the Babylonian strategies they understand it's the language which as I draw this conversation to an end, I would wish to build a case on it, but from layer case and into depth. It's important to understand okay. As I was having a conversation with them, I said one of the things that manifested as a limitations to what the youth had gathered to do was that there was a communication gap. So in the ground of preparation, as the church was preparing, they had to prepare for the place where the visitors are going to sleep. They prepared for where the pastors or other us, the servant of God are going to sleep. They even prepared for the kitchen department, preparing their own stuffs. And I believe also some sessions within the teaching scopes was also submitted to the people that they expected them to come. But listen to this one thing that happened in that conversation again. That at the end of the day, the people that had promised that they are going to come as visitors from other places, they failed to manifest. They did not appear. So what happened? When they failed to come, the preparation and the time that we have wasted to prepare the place where the visitors are going to sleep was all a waste of time. Now, preparing even because the resources that was at hand was so limited. The resources at hand was so limited. Now, what it took for the resources that was made available at hand, again, in the gathering of all of those resources, which it was all of itself a lot of efforts. But also again we realize that the failure from the visitors, all of visitors from far places, they failed to appear. Now, the kitchen department has prepared food beyond what was needed. Now, at some point in time, we are going to even say, maybe it is the will of God. And let us, many a time this statement, maybe it is the will of God, or I think it is the will of God, has been used wrongly. I think maybe one time we need to have a conversation of what we call the will of God, because many people are entered into blame game to what we call the will of God today. Let me shift to another scope of a story. Remember, the power of language is one of the strategies of the Babylonian system, our conversation. One of those evenings, I remember a brethren came. I would be able to draw back and reconcile these two stories. Don't lose me. Okay, don't lose yourself in the boundaries. I'm going to narrate this conversation. A while back, I was approached by a brother within the church, and then I remember when he came to me, he told me that there's a meeting that is going to take place in a certain place. So, because of the nature of the meeting that is going to take place in such a kind of a place, he needed me to be available. like one who's going to hold the hand as we're going to move in such a kind of a place. So then what happened? It came to pass that finally we entered into the space of that meetings. And so when we moved there, we were welcome. Their arrangement and their preparation was as per the way they have prepared. But they approached me and then they said, the servants of God that, primarily, as per their plan, they have designed for them to be around. The servants of God had failed to appear. So, what then was the scope of their conversation? That I should stand now in the gap. I said it well. That is a great thing for me. So, I managed to step on. Now, 1 minute to the time of my ministration, they called one of the young brother to come and interpret me. So when the young man comes, instead of this brother coming on board for us to minister together, listen to what he says. He says, if it is the will of God for me to stand before people, then I will stand. Now, imagine we are remaining with only 1 minute to enter the pulpit to minister. But he's saying, if it is the will of God, then I will go. So, I begin to ask myself, should we now go back and begin to pray again and discover the will of God, whether you should enter and preach here? It's a doctrinal error. It's all not of a doctrinal concept. That is why I pointed to now in the church today, many of these things, so what we call now the will of God has been used ignorantly. The ignorance of doctrine. So it's important to understand. And now, again, back to this other story. Another thing that was interfered that within the kitchen department, they now prepared food beyond what was within the scope of a budget, right? But also, the budget, remember, primarily, the resources was inadequate. Now, within the renderings or the provisions of whatever was taking place, right, within the meetings, certain people that are meant to stand in certain gap, they did not manage to come. Now, what is that thing that gave all of this breakage within this meeting? Was one thing: communication gap. There was sort of a communication gap that manifested, and I realized that whenever a communication requires language, but into depth. It's important to understand that language is what you understand for you to be able to reply. Language is what defines our coordination. Language is what defines our operation within the networking system. But let me now enter deep a bit and then bring this conversation to an end. When we are talking about language, it's deeper than what we speak with. The Bible says that the Lord has given me the tongue of the land. That word for tongue there is the